He used to raise his voice, not because he was angry, but because silence was never allowed. Every quiet moment used to feel dangerous, like something was wrong, like love had left the room. So he'd speak up, over-explain, try harder. But now, he doesn't chase, he doesn't beg, he doesn't perform, not because he doesn't feel, but because he's finally tired. Tired of fighting for peace in the noise. He's not cold, he just fought too long for silence. If you've ever felt like the calmest parts of you were misunderstood, this story is for you. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize you're not alone in how you've changed. He remembers when silence was punishment. There was a time when silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like punishment, wearing a mask. It wasn't just the absence of words, it was the tension, the cold air between two people who used to feel warm to each other. The way her back would turn in bed, the way plates would be set down is just a little too firmly, the way the room echoed with everything left unsaid, and everything he was too afraid to ask. He used to panic when things got quiet. His heart would race, not from anger but from fear. Fear that she was done, that love had left the room, that if he didn't fix it, right now he might lose her. So he'd rush in with words, with gifts, with, "I'm sorry," even when he wasn't sure what he had done wrong, because silence, to him, meant danger. And he learned somewhere along the way that being noisy was safer than being still. But the cost was high. Every time he tried to soothe what wasn't his to heal, he chipped away at parts of himself. Every over-explanation, every forced joke was to lighten the mood, every apology for simply being tired. Eventually, he stopped fearing the silence itself, and started fearing who he was becoming in his desperation to avoid it. Now, years later, he sits in quiet mornings without flinching. He welcomes the stillness, not because it's empty, but because it's finally safe. When silence enters the room now, he doesn't try to fill it. He lets it sit beside him, like an old friend who needs no explanation. Because at last, silence isn't a punishment. It's peace, hard-earned and deeply honored. He doesn't explain as much anymore. There was a time he felt obligated to explain everything, not because he wanted to, but because silence always seemed to offend someone. If he took a day to himself, they assumed he was angry. If he didn't text back within the hour, they wondered if they'd done something wrong. If he went quiet in the middle of tension, they accused him of shutting down. So he'd explain, not once but over and over. "I just need time to think. Oh, I'm not mad. I just need space. It's not you. I process things differently." But every explanation began to feel like a courtroom statement. He wasn't clarifying, he was defending. And even then, his intentions were often twisted, his words misheard, his calm mistaken for emotional distance. He realized something heartbreaking. It wasn't that he was hard to understand. It was that some people weren't listening to understand. They were listening to correct. Now, he speaks less, not out of spite, but out of clarity. He's learned that those who truly know him don't need 1,000 words to feel close. And those who always need a reason are often just looking for control. He doesn't offer explanations to ease someone's insecurity anymore. He offers presence and lets that be enough. He's not being mysterious. He's just finally at peace with being known, quietly. If someone misreads that stillness as detachment, or that pause as disinterest, so be it. He no longer explains his calm, because anyone who demands a reason for his peace probably isn't ready to share it. He's done begging to be heard. He used to believe that if he found the right words, the perfect timing, the right tone, she would finally hear him. So he practiced patience, spoke gently, softened his anger into concern, turned his truth into diplomacy. He didn't want to dominate the conversation. He just wanted to be met somewhere halfway. But the more he tried, the more he realized some people don't listen to understand. They listen to rebut, to defend, to protect their version of the story even if it meant erasing his. He remembers one evening clearly. He was trying to explain why he'd gone quiet for a few hours, trying to articulate the pressure he'd felt all day. And halfway through his sentence, she interrupted, not with a question, but with a counterpoint, a challenge, a correction. And in that moment, something in him cracked. Not from anger, but from realization. He wasn't in a dialogue. He was in a debate he never signed up for. From that night on, something changed. He stopped pleading with people to see his side. He stopped handing over his words, hoping they'd be valued. Now, he speaks when his voice will land. And when it won't, he keeps it. Not out of bitterness, but because throwing your truth into an echo chamber doesn't make you noble, it makes you tired. He's not silent because he's lost his voice. He's silent because he finally knows its worth, and he only raises it when the room is capable of listening with love. He's not a mystery, he's just private. People often mistake his quiet for complexity. They call him hard to read, emotionally distant, or closed off, as if stillness is a problem, as if privacy is a defense. But the truth is simpler. He's not hiding. He's healing in peace and on purpose. There was a time when he shared everything, his fears, his thoughts, his dreams, not because he felt ready, but because someone demanded access, and he mistook that demand for closeness. He's learned since then. Real intimacy isn't built on exposure. It's built on permission. And not every sacred thing needs to be spoken aloud to be known. He's not being aloof. He's being careful with what's sacred now because too many times he offered his heart like an open book, only to have someone skim the pages and misunderstand the ending. These days, he's built a quiet life, one where silence isn't a void, but a choice. A life where his thoughts are allowed to linger and settle, where he can feel something fully before deciding if it even needs to be said. He's not cold. He's curated. And if someone needs constant access to his inner world to feel close, they're looking for control, not connection. He's not a puzzle to be solved. He's a sanctuary calm, intentional, and alive with quiet meaning. And only those who can feel warmth without noise deserve to step inside. He doesn't rush to fix everything now. He used to believe that love meant fixing her sadness, fixing her stress, fixing the silence that stretched between them like a wound neither of them could name. So whenever she sighed, he asked, "What's wrong?" Whenever she withdrew, he leaned in. Whenever her mood shifted, he shifted with it, scrambling to solve what was never clearly broken. He took it all on her worries, her reactions, her long emotional shadows, not because he was a savior, but because he was scared. Scared that if he didn't make her happy again, he'd be blamed, or worse, abandoned. So he overstepped. Not out of pride, but out of fear. He lost sleep analyzing her tone. Lost pieces of himself trying to hold up both hearts when only one was asking for the weight. And slowly he realized, carrying someone else's emotions doesn't make you strong. It makes you disappear. Now, when someone he loves is hurting, he doesn't rush in with answers. He stays. He's present. But he no longer assumes it's his job to undo someone else's storm. Because not every emotion is a signal. Not every silence is an invitation. He's learned that real love allows room for discomfort without panic. That presence matters more than fixing. So when he doesn't jump in now, it's not because he's indifferent. It's because he finally understands. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is trust someone enough to let them feel what they feel, without trying to rescue them from it. He fought for his peace, and now he guards it. Peace wasn't something he discovered by accident. It wasn't handed to him through time, or granted by age. It was fought for inch by inch, breath by breath, in the aftermath of emotional chaos. He earned it through sleepless nights and conversations that drained more than they healed, through walking away from people he once begged to stay, through realizing that love, when misaligned, doesn't soften you, it strips you. There was a time when noise filled every corner of his life, arguments that went nowhere, expectations wrapped in guilt, a constant pressure to prove that he was good, loving, enough. And when he finally walked away from it all, he didn't find peace waiting. He had to rebuild it, day by day, creating space where silence was allowed, setting boundaries without apology, learning that being calm wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Now, he protects that peace the way others protect possessions. It's not up for negotiation. It's not something he'll trade for chemistry, convenience, or companionship. If love arrives with noise, with urgency, with the kind of energy that demands attention before it offers respect, he lets it pass, because he knows the cost of losing himself. He's lived the anxiety, the second-guessing, the emotional burnout. So today, peace is not a preference. It's a requirement. You're welcome to sit beside it. But don't touch it without permission. Because for a man who fought to reclaim his inner quiet, any love that threatens it isn't love worth keeping. He's not afraid of love. He's afraid of noise. He's not running from love. That's the part most people misunderstand. He still believes in 2 cups on the table, in the sound of shared laughter echoing through the kitchen, in hands that reach, not to pull but to hold. What he's walked away from isn't connection. It's the chaos that used to masquerade as connection, the kind of love that confuses urgency with importance, that rushes every conversation like it's a competition, that demands vulnerability on command and punishes stillness like it's a betrayal. He's been in love that needed drama to feel alive, where silence was seen as a threat, where every quiet moment became a test. Do you still care? Are you mad? Say something. He doesn't miss that. Now, he wants a different kind of rhythm, one that doesn't spike his nervous system. He wants to walk beside someone, not sprint ahead or be dragged behind. He's not chasing butterflies. He's choosing peace. A steady kind of love, one that knows the value of breathing together, without talking, just to fill the air. He no longer needs the high of being swept off his feet. He's lived long enough to know that what comes fast often burns out faster. So if love arrives demanding attention before offering presence, he'll pass. Not because he's cold, but because he's careful. And some nights, the quiet rustle of a book and the sound of his own breath feel more romantic than all the shouting that once tried to pass for passion. He's learned that emotional distance can be protection, not punishment. People think he's closed off, that he's distant, maybe even cold. But what they don't see is the cost that came with being wide open. There was a time he gave his full self, freely. Every thought, every feeling, every ache and hope laid bare in the name of intimacy. And what did it bring? Moments of connection, yes, but also misunderstanding, manipulation. People who took his openness as permission to invade, criticize, control. He learned the hard way that emotional availability without discernment isn't connection, it's exposure. So he changed. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Now, his emotional space is sacred. It's not locked, but it's not wide open either. You won't find him volunteering his story to every smile. You won't hear his pain on the first date, or the second. He's not playing hard to get. He's honoring what it took to put himself back together. Emotional distance for him isn't a punishment to others. It's protection for himself. If you approach gently with patience, with consistency, you'll find warmth beyond the pause, depth beyond the quiet. But if you demand access before trust is earned, if you kick at the door expecting it to swing open, you'll meet silence. Not because he's unkind, but because a man who's been broken knows how long it takes to rebuild, and he won't risk that peace for anyone unwilling to treat it with care. He doesn't confuse drama for devotion anymore. There was a time when he thought intensity meant intimacy. The raised voices, the tears that fell mid-argument, the slammed doors followed by desperate apologies. She'd say, "It's only because I love you so much." And he believed her. Because back then, pain felt like passion, and passion felt like proof. If it didn't hurt sometimes, was it even real? If it didn't swing between highs and lows, was it even love? That's what he was taught, not in words, but in patterns, in relationships where chaos was disguised as care, where emotional turbulence was mistaken for depth. But over time and through enough heartbreak, he learned a quieter truth. Love doesn't have to roar to be real. It doesn't have to fracture to feel strong. He learned that the kind of love that screams also wounds. That apologies after explosions aren't healing their habit. That tenderness delivered only after turmoil isn't romance. It's recovery from damage that shouldn't have happened in the first place. Now, he watches for the subtle signs. How does she handle disappointment? Can she disagree without destruction? Is her warmth constant, or does it come only after the fire? He no longer confuses drama for devotion. Because real love doesn't test your nervous system. It protects it. And any affection that arrives soaked in volatility, he lets it pass no matter how familiar it may feel. Because he's done mistaking chaos for closeness. He's not unromantic. He's just unlearning what was never love to begin with. He needs quiet not just in his home, but in her spirit. He's been in relationships where everything looked calm on the surface. The smiles, the gentle tone, the polite gestures. But underneath, a current of unrest, mood swings that arrived unannounced. Games played in silence, withdrawal, withholding, sudden distance with no explanation. She didn't need to raise her voice. He could feel the storm in her energy. He remembers walking into the room and instantly sensing it. Not from what she said, but from what she didn't. The sigh that lingered too long. The glance that carried accusation. The tension that settled in the air like humidity before a thunderstorm. It wore on him not loudly, but constantly. Like an invisible weight that pulled on his peace. Now, he listens to more than words. He listens to presence. Does she bring calm with her steps? Does her silence feel grounding or loaded with unmet expectation? He's not asking for perfection. He's asking for harmony, a kind of emotional steadiness that allows his nervous system to rest, not brace. Because after hell treats, he knows it's not just about sharing space with someone. It's about sharing stillness. He's learned that a woman's true nature isn't revealed in how sweet she sounds, but in how safe she feels to be around. And if her spirit is calm, he'll let her near. But if her soul is always in conflict, he'll love her from a distance, to protect the quiet he fought so hard to build. He's not cold. He's calibrated. He used to wonder if something was wrong with him, why he didn't react as quickly, why he paused before answering, why crowded rooms made him quiet, not energized. People took his stillness as distance, his thoughtful silences as disengagement, his boundaries as aloofness. But they were wrong. He wasn't pulling away, he was tuning in. With time, he's come to know himself like a well-played instrument. What strikes harmony? What causes dissonance? Where his limits live and where his peace begins. He knows how much of himself he can give without losing balance. He's no longer interested in emotional overexposure, in pouring out until he's empty. So now, when he seems quiet, he's not lost, he's choosing. When he waits before speaking, it's not hesitation, it's consideration. And when he withdraws, it's not rejection, it's preservation. He's calibrated intentionally and with care. Because a man who's endured emotional extremes no longer lives in reaction. He lives in rhythm. He doesn't offer all of himself to everyone. He offers presence to those who can receive it without demanding performance. And if someone calls that cold, let them, because he knows the truth. Stillness isn't a lack of feeling, it's a mastery of it, and he'd rather be misunderstood for his calm than exhausted from trying to prove his warmth. He used to be loud, used to explain, used to fight for love, for clarity, for peace. Now, he's still. Not because he stopped caring, but because he started healing. He's not trying to be understood by everyone, just the right one. And if that means being misunderstood by many, he's okay with that. Because after 50, the most sacred sound in a man's life isn't her laughter, isn't music, isn't even the words, "I love you." It's the sound of his own peace, uninterrupted. So when you see a man who no longer fights for the last word, don't call him cold, call him free.